unauthorized to fire at will.
Hey, thanks for stopping by here at Minnesota Black Robe Regiment on YouTube. Um, hey, David, thanks for stopping by. We are going to be sitting down for a second part of the conversation that I had 2 weeks ago with my friend Heather about her son Caleb, who died in 2000 down at Fort Bragg, and the malfeasance and the obfuscation and overall um, chicanery, I think it's the best word I can use without cussing right now, that took place there at Fort Bragg with the command staff of the 82nd Airborne Division, and just how much they've done to hide what really happened in the case of this young soldier's death. If you're interested in that, you can go back to season 2, episode 13 that I did with Heather. We really kind of hash out the details of what took place there. But tonight we're going to be bringing Heather and her attorney Daniel on, and we're going to be doing some updates and some education, if you will, about what the fight for justice in Caleb's case looks like going forward, and what Heather and Daniel are fighting for, and some of the roadblocks and impediments that will be standing in their way. Doesn't mean things are impossible, but when you take on the state, you take on a bully. And there's really, it's when you're fighting on a battlefield where the enemy not only has created the battlefield and has set up all the rules of engagement, it's really hard to come up with a strategy where the enemy isn't aware of what you're going to do. And I hate to do it, but it's almost for the sake of comedic relief. There's a skit, or not a skit, a bit that Bill Cosby. I know I'm not supposed to mention Bill Cosby's name. He's persona non grata in the comic world today. But there's a bit that Bill Cosby did a while ago where he was talking about how back at the beginning of this great republic, the American colonial forces and the English met for rules of engagement conversation, and basically what it came down to was that the Brits said, okay, so if we understand this correctly, we will march in formation in squares, we will follow orders, we will follow commands, we will continue to fight exactly the way we have been fighting for this entire time, only where you, the colonial army, wants to fight. And the colonial general Washington said, yes, of course. And then the Brits said, if we further understand, you will not follow those same rules of European warfare. You will be hiding behind trees, bushes, fences, inside of buildings, on top of tall hills, mountains, and trees, taking pot shots at us from a long ways away, picking off our commanding officers, in a total contradiction of how warfare has been fought European style for the last 200 years. And the colonial said yes. And the British said, okay, we agree. That's what it's like when you go and take on the state, the federal state. They lay out all the rules of engagement, and then you have to try and win in that situation. So before we get too much further into this, ladies and gentlemen, check out the merchandise. TC would love to have your support. TC broke, okay? So it's it. I've given up a lot in this fight, and so I would appreciate all the help you can get, and especially if you have it in you to head over to my Subscribe Star and pick the entry level of the Subscribe Star. It's $3 to come in. You're going to have some exclusive content over there. I'm going to be putting out my video diary in pieces from when I was placed under internal investigation by the Olmsted County Sheriff's Office for my podcast content. And I'm going to be putting that out in pieces, and I'm going to be putting that out only on Subscribe Star, because that's what Subscribe Star is for. It's to give the people who subscribe something extra that the rest of you don't get. once in a while I might put a little teaser out here on YouTube and Rumble for you guys. But if you want to see the whole thing, you're going to have to head over to Subscribe Star. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce you to Daniel. And I am not going to try and say his name other than Daniel. Daniel, thank you for doing this.
Of course, pleasure to be here again, TC. Well, I guess on a different pod, but pleasure to speak with you.
Don't tell anybody. I might be a host on another show. I don't know.
This is the one they should be watching. So
yes, for sure, this one. Well, watch the other one too, but we're off this week. So, tell us a little bit, and while you're talking, I'm going to bring Heather in. But tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, before we start to delve into the finer points of this case.
Sure. So my name is Daniel Maharaj. I'm an attorney specializing in military affairs, veterans benefits, and federal employment. That's what's brought us here together here today. Part of the work that I do with my firm involves advocacy for military service members and their family, like Heather here, for those that have unfortunately been lost to service. Now, as part of the work that we do, one of the areas that there's a need for legal representation and advocacy for the families and our service members is with service members' rights. One of the big areas that involves is, and this is something that, as background, some people may not know, but our service members, when it comes to holding the government accountable for negligent issues against them, outside of any combat or war scenarios, our service members have less rights than our federal inmates. And it's something that a lot of people don't know. And that's essentially how I came to meet Heather. But what we do in our firm partially is advocating for service members and their families and helping represent those families for claims against the government, and specifically claims of medical negligence against the DoD for non-combat injuries where service members have incurred those injuries. Unfortunately, some have passed away. Some are forced to live with catastrophic injuries as a result of that. And there's very limited accountability that our service members and their families have when it comes to ensuring that these issues and the negligence that they were subjected to doesn't happen again to anyone else, and for their own sake to ensure that there's, again, some form of accountability. And that, takes us to where I've met the lovely Heather Baker here, and her son Smitty, and advocating for Smitty here and trying to ensure some accountability with what happened to him at Fort Bragg.
So Heather, you were on 2 weeks ago, and we told the in-depth part of the story, talked about just your fight for information, and how you were treated and what you had to go through. How in the world did you run into Daniel? Because you guys are, you're both, south of that Mason-Dixon line, you rebs, but you're not located in the same state. So like, how do you find an attorney who specializes in this? Because everybody knows attorneys are like plumbers. You never know where to find them and whether or not you need one until it's too late. So
yeah, and he just like that, he just dropped right into my, my space. And here's what happened is that another Army mom, Cami Delbarba, her son Des Delbarba is a wounded warrior, and I don't know if you know his story, but you guys, if you haven't looked up Des Delbarba's story as a wounded warrior, you really need to. Her mission is to unite all of us, to press for change and ultimately justice for our service members who are dying or being wounded. For the rest of his life. Des is now wounded severely, and I don't know all the ins and outs and details, and that's why I encourage you guys to look it up. But
So you met
all
Daniel through her,
yes.
and how did that? I mean, how's that conversation go? Because you're asking for representation for Caleb, but for yourself, how do you approach an attorney and say, "Hey, here's my situation. The victim here, the service member, isn't with us anymore." And Daniel, how does that play out?
Sure. So Heather, if you want to, in terms of, I
Well,
think it's so getting answers was the first thing. No one's thinking whether they have a claim necessarily, but navigating when you're left with the news, that worst news that comes to your door that someone could have. And the first step you have to take to get answers, it's, as Heather, I'm sure could talk to you about, it's not an easy path.
Was that what you approached Daniel with? Was like, "Hey, I just need help getting answers"?
well, there's just so many extreme red flags. I mean, from the moment they told me that he had passed away, I mean, like, you can't even believe it, because he was fine, and he wasn't overseas. He was on a base on American soil. I never in a million years would have thought that I would have had soldiers on my doorstep to inform me that my son's not with me anymore. And by the way, just so you all know, I had about a handful and a half attorneys laugh me out of their offices before Daniel came around.
And so you're out pursuing legal representation to try and get some answers. You weren't even thinking about, like, is there even a civil case here? And so you get introduced to Daniel. Daniel, how did that first conversation go? What kind of stuff are you asking in this situation? Because there again, the ultimate, I mean, not to take away the victim mentality at all from, and I don't mean that in the negative light. I mean, we have family members that are victims here as well, and maybe even more so because they didn't sign on for this. But how do you triage a case like this and go, what's the situation and how can I help if I can help? How do you make those decisions? Because there's a lot about this that stinks.
Right. And that's, I think, right off the bat with talking to Heather about learning about what happened to Caleb, just from the few articles that had covered his initial death prior to her contacting me, reading what happened just with the suspicious circumstances of how someone like Caleb could pass away under the circumstances that he did, sitting in his barracks room, was, the red flag off the bat. And then what followed was, with the first conversation with Heather, was a lot of, this just, like you said, stinks. This doesn't sound right. There's a lot of barriers for controlling the information that she was getting from that point. And again, when I don't recall the exact time she contacted me after, but it was some time had passed since Caleb passed away, and she still didn't have the answers for the most simple things that a mother in that scenario you would expect to have. Delays with, ensuring that he could get a proper burial, things like that.
They wouldn't even release his personal belongings to her. Yeah. And that took what, Heather, a year?
That took about 6 months.
6 months?
Yeah, 6.5 months. And that happened before I met Daniel. I mean, I went through a lot of stuff on my own. I mean, yeah, I had to make some clatter and some noise just to get his belongings back.
So that the reason I brought that up is because, Daniel, I think you can speak to this. That's telling you there's something going on here. There's these intentional defensive positions. Yeah, I'm going to use some military lingo. They're putting up these defensive positions and setting up these checkpoints to delay every move that Heather makes. When she reaches out to you and you listen to the case, were you immediately like, okay, there's something here, or did you have to do a lot of digging? Because I know you've read through everything. I know you've seen it all. Was it immediately clear to you that there was something going on here?
So there was definitely something. It was very clear there was something going on with Caleb's case. Now, going back to just that military service members are very reduced with their rights when it comes to actually legal rights for any type of issue that happens to them against the DoD. There's always an uphill battle with that. But seeing and hearing, the more facts I started to hear from Heather about what she knew that happened to Caleb versus what she was being told happened to Caleb, there's a lot of inconsistencies right off the bat that she had her concrete, text messages with her son, things like that, that just didn't add up with the timeline that she's being told of what happened to her son. And I believe she still hadn't gotten the investigative records until we got involved. And that's always a key starting point with any time there's a death in the service, is getting there's usually a command investigation of some kind, depending on the branch. And then there's a criminal investigation of some kind, depending on the branch. Here, the Army CID investigated Caleb's case. So there was active investigations from what she was being told, but there were shields for what she was able to know as part of those investigations. And, right off the bat, that was a jumping off point into, at the very least, Heather needs to get the heavily redacted versions that the Army will release of these reports for her to the best of her ability, just so whatever they're seeing, we could at least have it and see what it looks like, because there's a lot of gaps in the timeline. There's a lot of issues, again, Heather did a very good job navigating prior to coming to me in terms of getting information that she was able to get and having a lot of understanding as to what she, believed had happened to Caleb versus what she was being told had happened to Caleb. And that was, I think, a sticking point to, let's get some answers. Let's see what's actually going on here. And let's see what possibilities, in terms of legal recourse, after we get some bearings of what we're looking at, let's see if there's actual legal recourse. Now, there's a lot of hurdles with these cases off the bat. So I don't think I was thinking, Caleb's got a slam dunk case or anything right off the bat. But as soon as we got those records, then it became clear there was a possible legal action through the medical side of things with what happened to Caleb.
Let me ask this. I would imagine you've dealt with everything from severe injury and trauma now to Caleb's death. Is Caleb's the first CONUS death that you've dealt with in a situation like this where you're seeing some of these things, or can you speak to whether or not this is a track record for the DoD?
Unfortunately, it's anytime there's a service member death in a barrack scenario, in my experience, there's often a lot of issues and red flags, so to say, that from the outside looking in look very suspicious versus the narrative that comes out as to what happened to that particular service member. Now, what happened in Caleb's case, I think, was particularly egregious given the amount that everyone knew his severe head injury had occurred within his team, on just what Heather had known from talking to everyone that contacted Caleb, that was around Caleb when that happened. But in terms of I don't want to say cover up, but the looking for a way out of what we know happened to Caleb being the cause of why Caleb died. That's kind of what it often looks to be the case, that there's something else to hang the hat on in terms of, well, yes, that may have happened, but it's actually natural how he died, unfortunately, and that seems to be a lot of what I often see in cases where service members passed away on base in this type of scenario.
Is the fight in this situation getting, for lack of better terminology, like when you're talking about a criminal case and you're talking about investigations, you hear an awful lot about discovery. And I know discovery can apply to civil cases, civil litigation as well, but this is a strange amalgam of kind of like just creepy, almost criminal behavior, of almost criminal negligence on the part of a lot of supervisory staff and command staff, whether they be NCOs and commissioned officers. But there's also just a lot of obfuscation that's coming at this that clouds the story even more, which takes people who are already at high alert about the way the government, the way the state operates. Does Caleb, the way Caleb's story play out, does it make fighting for the justice of this, or justice in this situation, feel even more paramount versus, hey, we've got a injured soldier who's never going to be able to have a full-time job. He's permanent, he's 100% disability, but you guys are still denying benefits, and on and on and on. There again, not to downplay how important the disability of a veteran is, but is there something more pressing about this that makes you feel like you've got to push this harder from a certain perspective?
Absolutely. And I think you hit it on the head there in terms of, if the idea that this could happen to a service member like Caleb on our base, and the reports that were finalized and put out by the command there at Fort Bragg, signed off by the commanding general, up to the highest
Who
levels.
who was the commanding general at that time? Do you remember the name or know the name, Heather or Daniel?
Well, I'm not sure about the general, but I do know the Colonel Scotty Otan was his colonel.
In charge, yeah. So at the time, I think there was some PCSing going on with individuals that were in charge, and that's also part of what the Army's reasoning as to why there was this disconnect from instructions and orders to watch Caleb, with folks leaving, going on training, and things of that nature. Off the top of my head, I don't know who the commanding general was at that time, but there was a signature. It's a redacted signature, so they do a good job to black out those that have signed off on everything.
Okay, let me ask it from this perspective then. If we hear this constantly from people, everybody who watches my channel knows what I used to do for a career. They know my perspective on law enforcement reform, and why, from a libertarian paleo-conservative perspective, I feel like it's an incredibly important topic. And every time I bring that topic up, people say to me, look, if you don't have anything to hide, you don't have anything to fear. Talk to the cops. They're not out to get you. If you do have a problem with that, you probably have something criminal going on. I've seen, and Heather, bless her heart, when you ask her for information, you just need to be prepared to be drowned in a deluge of screenshots and everything. Like it's like that cash back commercial that you see where you watch it on TV and they're like, oh, I got this new cash back app and money's coming out of cereal boxes. Don't ever ask Heather for information. But I'm looking at all of this stuff and it's like redacted, and then the private, and then redacted, redacted. It's names, it's situations, it's everything. It's their entire, almost, it looks like sometimes paragraphs. And I'm going, if this is a simple cut and dried case, because as we know, the coroner ruled that it was bacterial meningitis, but then also stated there'd be no need for prophylactic treatment for anybody else in the area. If this is a cut and dried situation, why are we redacting anything? There should be no need to hide anybody's name from the family at the very least. If they wanted to say, hey, look, we're going to give you this, but we're going to kind of ask you, without forcing it, we're going to ask you to kind of put a gag on it just to protect the anonymity of some of these. But Heather can't even reach out to anyone to get any answers to say, hey, I'm not mad at you. Can you tell me, what was it like for Caleb? Like they're hiding everything. They're hiding witnesses. They're hiding, people who are directly responsible. Do you think that's going to be a stumbling block for them? Are you going to be able to point to that and say they're hiding something here, Your Honor? Or
so, with getting the opportunity to put it in front of a judge, we are limited with a route to actually getting in front of a judge. And that goes back to that Ferris doctrine that comes back from the 1950 Supreme Court case.
So give us the 10,000 foot overview of the Ferris Doctrine real quick and what it says. And I know we've got you for a limited amount of time, and I told Heather the last thing we need to do is drag her back through this for 2 hours because she's doing another show on Friday. So
nice. Well, and I'll try to keep it condensed. I know this could be a whole seminar on just that, but
and I might want to bring you back on for that sometime as well.
Yeah,
so.
Definitely happy to come talk with that anytime, TC. You just let me know. But so summary real quick, Ferris Doctrine. You have the 1946, the government passes the Federal Tort Claims Act that allows individuals to sue the government for negligence for certain property and injury damages. 1950s, you have a Supreme Court case come up where a service member, Lieutenant Randall Ferris, dies in a barracks fire that due to faulty wiring that was known should have never happened. Him and 2 other individuals, I believe, died. Their spouses sued under the Federal Tort Claims Act. The Federal Tort Claims Act has an exception that service members are not allowed to sue for combatant activities of the military. Outside of combatant activities of the military, it was permitted until that case went up to the Supreme Court in 1950s. 1950 Supreme Court decides that the government is not liable under the FTCA, the Federal Tort Claims Act, for any injuries for a service member where the injuries arise out of or in the course of incident to service. That term, incident to service, becomes known as what's known as the Ferris Doctrine, which has basically been a shield for the DoD to hide behind for the last 70 plus years to shield any access or for a legal recourse against the DoD for the most egregious of negligence cases, despite being unrelated to combat. Something as simple as you had to get surgery on your left kidney and they actually took out your right kidney and they tell you, sorry, TC, we took out the wrong one. Ordinary scenario, there would be some form of repercussions for that type of issue, not for a service member. Same thing, amputation gone wrong, sorry. Left scissors inside your stomach when we were in there, sorry.
And that's so all of that arises from what I hate this term, so no offense to you as an attorney, but because I know there's attorneys on both sides of this. I hate the idea of case law, like cases don't establish law, and I hate the term of precedence because one case should never establish a precedence, but here we are. So they've had this precedence that they've relied on. So let me ask you this. Here's where I'm going to get a little tinfoil hatty. Normally I save that for Tuesdays when I'm on with Skipper, but normally it's Skipper doing it and I'm the one setting him straight. But here's my tinfoil hat kind of perspective. One of the things that we've been told, and everybody now who's in this fight for Caleb and to help this grieving mother, this Gold Star mom, is, Caleb hit his head while working. Is that verified? Or is that, do you see that as a potential to make that as incident to service? Because I did not read anything anywhere where anybody that I could be named as actually being a witness to him having had this accident.
It was there was a young lady that was witness to it, I was told.
You were told?
Yes, in I spoke with who was it?
Well, but that's what I'm saying is this young lady, you were told, witnessed this injury, and now here we are now having to establish whether or not what actually happened was really an incident to service. Mm-hmm. To me, it feels like a lot of covering your six to me.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Well, and it goes even
further. And that young lady's name has been redacted.
Yeah. It's
yes, I happen to know her name, but yes, it has been redacted.
So go ahead, Daniel.
But right, that, so it's definitely a way. So they don't even have to get creative with using incident. The courts have gotten so far-reaching that basically your status of active duty can be determined to be incident to service. It's very rare that a court has recognized that what happens to you while you're active duty is an incident to service. Even in situations where you're going on leave or you're not on base, you get in an accident on the way off base and someone hits you, that's deemed in a lot of 99% of these cases, they've expanded this judicial doctrine through the courts. So the military, they don't even need to get creative, but using that, I do think that helps their argument as to this shouldn't be allowed to get real recourse in court under any type of tort law, because that is incident to service. Look, we said it would happen while he was working. That's what they would argue in that. But ultimately, they would say the entirety of whatever happened to Caleb was entirely based on his service, and therefore should be barred under the Ferris Doctrine. But there's at least now the opportunity for the medical side. If there's a medical negligence claim, the DOD can't now just say Ferris Doctrine, go kick rocks. They at least have to take the claim, investigate the claim, accept your evidence. But again, it's not court. There's no discovery. There is no opportunity for a hearing before a decision is made.
You're not deposing anyone.
Yeah, there's nothing, no real legal process other than you file the claim with your evidence, and it's basically a black box as to what happens on the other side until you get a letter saying we are going to pay X amount or we're denying it under XYZ reasons. And you can submit your appeal to a board of people you'll never see, but you can't submit new evidence. It has to be what we've looked at already. So that's the process we now have.
So when you're in that position where you're trying to get to the first decision stage and they reject it and you file it to the appeal board, you don't ever get to talk to the appeal board?
Nope. It's a written appeal and it's on the record. No additional evidence is accepted by the appeal board unless there's some good cause reason as to why that should be accepted. But their regulations.
And that appeal board is made up of DOD officials, Army officials,
DOD officials. So one medical staff, I believe. It's outside of the branch, allegedly, that you are involved with. So
in combat with, so to speak.
Yes. So it's, I believe, a panel of 3 to 5. They didn't exactly specify. And then it's at least one medical staff member of some kind, command, and then I believe legal as well.
So I'm going to ask a hard question here, and if you're not in a position where you can answer it, how many of these cases have you taken and not had to appeal the original decision?
I've had to appeal any decision that has been rendered in these cases so far.
So every case that you've fought, you've had to go and do an appeal?
Correct.
So, folks, this is, first of all, if you haven't liked the video yet, please do. Let's drive this up in the algorithm. If you haven't shared this yet, please do. Let's drive this up in the algorithm. Heather, while you're sitting there, you should be sharing this out on all your social media.
Okay.
Really good.
Well, I was actually looking for evidence. I was going to say that I interviewed Lieutenant Orr is who I interviewed the day I received Caleb's belongings. And I found this sheet that had... This sheet right here is the E Company phone roster, and I couldn't help but call Second Lieutenant, or I just kind of go up the chain. I went up the chain and I just started calling and asking.
I can't imagine you being persistent.
I was just like, "Hey, can you tell me what happened to Caleb?" And he told me that it was PB2 Martinez who had been working with Caleb on that day on the deuce. So I don't know. So folks, here we are. You've got this situation, and like I said, push this out, share it, whatever platforms you can. And put it on repeat on a TV in a room that nobody sits in.
Or if you really want to mess with your kids, put it on the TV and turn the volume on and then pretend you're not home. Then they'll be wondering who's talking in the house. But then I want you guys to understand that one of the reasons why this conversation is important, it's not just because I was with the 82nd Airborne. Not just because I was a paratrooper, because the Army, the Airborne likes to use a phrase like, they call it high speed, low drag. I was low speed, high drag. That's what I was. I was not a top notch, I wasn't a special operator. Okay, let's just put it that way. But the biggest thing about this is the justice and the injustice of this, which is why this is a perfect topic for this channel, for my show, is because there's no justice in this. This is an absolute travesty. This kid, he hadn't even been at Fort Bragg for 2 months. 2 months. He didn't even have a chance to go and do what he signed up to do. All of his dreams, all of his hopes for his military career are dashed, and then everything's covered up so that this family can't get anything. Heather's not looking to get rich off of this, okay, folks? This is, anybody knows, even if you do sue and win in the military, there's no getting rich on that. There's none. But there's no answers, and this is about reform. Look, everything that I talk about is about change. It's about reform. And there's something within the spirit of people who share some of our perspectives. And if you happen to be kind of the patriotic conservative type, it's so common to get back behind the military and say, I support the vets. I support the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, Marines. Okay, we'll talk about the Space Force when they do something. But we've got all of this stuff, like even the Coast Guard, the Brown Water Navy. We just get behind these guys and we just rah, rah, rah. And then we even talk about how much we support the vets. But then when you hear a story like this, with a young man who didn't even have a chance to really put his life on the line in a combat situation, which is what he signed up to do. Bless his heart. I wish I would have known him before he signed up. But there's not, like, we're never going to know who he was going to be. We're never going to know what he was going to be. And there's nothing for the family. Nothing. Here you go. That's it. And Daniel, I know you deal with a lot of this stuff. What's the soldier's life insurance? What's that? I mean, they pay for that every month. And what's that payout on average?
It's a one-time, if they elect to continue the coverage once they're in, it's a one-time $500,000 life insurance policy that in the event that you die, that will go to your beneficiary. And separate from that, there may be a $100,000 death gratuity that your family would be entitled to with your burial rights that are usually covered by the service. Those are the compensation packages if someone has life insurance. If they don't have the life insurance, it's just that one-time $100,000 gratuity.
So you got to let this sink in, people, too, because every one of these kids, when they enlist, they're young. The thing that is on their mind is, I'm not going to be the one that dies. I can tell you, I watched people get ready to go into combat and they were like, I'm coming home. And a lot of them turned down the additional life insurance because they're going to be the ones that make it.
And you're right. They're not educated in terms of they're not being informed of the repercussions of waiving that, right? And you're not informed of, well, you don't actually have any other rights if something, God forbid, negative happens to you in non-combat and you're done. These things aren't discussed when people sign up. It's not that you're oh, by the way, did you know that if we cut off your wrong leg, you're shit out of luck? Yeah. That's not contemplated, I think, in a lot of folks' mind when they sign up. And like you said, they're young and ready, and the last thing on their mind is that this is something I should do to ensure those around, right. If something happened, this is the right call.
Well, they're invincible when they sign up. Then they get out of basic training and they're invincible and cocky. That's what they're like. They've learned a little bit of hand-to-hand combat, and they think they can go take on the bikers at the biker bar. You know, that's just how tough they think they are. And then to have a situation like this happen, like Heather, did Caleb have the additional life insurance?
I mean, he paid for his life insurance. Yes, he did. And, you know,
That doesn't bring him back, but
well, it's a body to me. It's him.
yeah, right.
So, I mean, what do you do with that? I don't know.
Right.
It sits there. You know, it sits there. I don't know.
And there again, I bring that up because this is all just, this is part of the way the state works. There's for lack of better terminology, there's no informed consent to this. It's just like, do you want this or don't you? There's none of that. There's just no, I mean, everybody has this Hollywood-esque vision of when a soldier dies, no matter where they die, they come home and this hero's welcome. And they're escorted in, and you know, that's how they picture it. And what no one sees is the after effect of all of this. No one sees the people that are hurting, and there's almost a sense in which when your loved one goes overseas in a war zone and they come home after losing their life in a war zone, you can understand it. What you can't understand is a situation like Caleb's, where like nobody wants to talk about it. Boy, they'll tell you all about it when they're in Iraq, when they're in Afghanistan or Syria or wherever they happen to get injured or heaven forbid killed in the line of duty. They'll tell you all the story. They'll tell you everything, and everybody will come out and they'll talk about it, and they'll like, I'm going to write a book about this. And then you turn around a situation like this and no one wants to talk at all. Heather's had a situation in this, and since you've worked with other families and service members, Heather's had a situation arise in this case where a service member has identified himself and has been, I'm just going to say, kind of a shyster in this situation. Is this, I'm being nicer than I was last Tuesday.
I'm not sure if Daniel's all up to speed on this, dude.
So this individual has reached out to Heather and said, "Hey, I have some information, but I'd like some money."
Yeah,
is this common
about him?
This is unique in my experience. It's not common that has happened. I do know in this.
I guess that's comforting.
Yeah, but it's also, you know, I think this individual knows that there's a mother seeking answers, been hitting up, you know, whoever can give her answers, and it's an opportunity for somebody, you know, unfortunately.
He's also somebody that was in Caleb's same unit, which is very weird to me.
Yeah.
And from the very beginning, I've been like, why is this guy asking me, of all people, when we're all the way across the country, why is he asking me for money?
And so the reason I brought that up was not to put you on the spot, Daniel, but I wanted to hear if this is something that you've run into before, because I've never heard this about a former teammate, for lack of better terminology, from the same unit, who said they're intimately familiar with a situation, also then turning around and saying, "Hey, can I get some cash?" That, to me, I'm like,
he was one of the last people to call Caleb or for Caleb to message right before he died. So it's just question mark.
Daniel, where are you guys at now and in the process, and where do you see yourselves going, and what kind of time frame? I know you're busy. I know you got to go write a final case.
No worries here.
Paper,
you know, we still got some time here, but yeah, in terms of with Caleb's case, so the Army got creative in Caleb's case and said that they're not liable under this law because there was a contractor involved
under the Ferris Doctrine.
Under the Ferris Doctrine and the little carve out that's been made for medical malpractice. They're saying within that medical malpractice law, where they're supposed to consider the claim, In Caleb's case, they made an initial determination to deny his case because a contractor is involved. And they're saying that aside from when the contractor saw him, everything was great, which we disagree with, and we're in the process of rebutting this. But it's, again, we're rebutting it to whomever we are rebutting it to on the idea that they're going to review it fairly and unbiasedly.
Let's just walk people through this. The contractor is a board certified medical doctor.
Yes.
In the employ of the Department of Defense, in particular, the Department of the Army at the Womack Army Hospital at Fort Bragg.
Correct.
He's an employee of the Department of Defense. As a contractor, he might be independent, but he's at this point he is working at Fort Bragg, contracted as a doctor for the hospital, providing soldier care.
Yes.
And they're claiming that because he's a contractor, they're off the hook.
That is correct.
Do we know who the doctor is?
We do. We'll keep that.
No, but I'm not trying to.
But yeah, we do know who the doctor is, and we know he's still employed there.
Yeah.
So they know that this doctor, their claim is, we're not saying it's not malpractice. We're not saying it's not medical negligence. We're just saying we're not responsible for this, but we're going to keep him on.
Yes. They essentially, it's almost like how the CID in Caleb's case, once they determined they had meningitis, the investigative efforts seemed to have ceased because there was a natural cause, despite all of these misstatements.
Allegedly.
Yeah, right. So
Allegedly.
there's a natural cause, but similarly to that, it was the Army was, what's our out here? And because of the last day of care that Caleb received at Fort Bragg, he was seen by this contractor. They're saying we're not liable. So whatever happened that day, we didn't look into it because we're not liable.
Now, just without, entering into employment law and all of that, does that even seem like a viable argument that somehow we're not liable because he's a contractor? Or do they not seem to have in your mind, and I know you're on Heather's side here, you're on the side of justice, you're on the side of truth, but doesn't that seem like a really shoddy excuse? Almost like we're off the hook.
Absolutely. And particularly when an ER, you may know Womack ER yourself from just your experience.
I do, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But it's not as though there's just one doctor staffing that whole ER, is there? There's not just one practice, and maybe they don't see all of them, and but in terms of there's a team, there's a nurse, there's a radiologist, there's a this, there's a that. Caleb had multiple hands on him, had multiple people touching him. So even if this was this guy, if there's an out with saying he's a contractor, the idea that other providers weren't culpable in knowing what was occurring in Caleb's case on the multiple days that he went to Womack before his death, that's blasphemy. That's just not right. And it looks very disingenuous in the manner in which this was presented to us, because they waited to tell us until this year that there's a contractor involved, despite ample opportunities for the last 3 years to say to the contrary,
The medical malpractice started, though, with being denied care.
It's noted in the command investigation, multiple members of his team, as well as his command team, say that Caleb was turned away from Womack the first time he went. The people in the meeting that debriefed us from Fort Bragg told us that evidence was in there as well, that they would look into whether he was actually turned away or not, because they didn't want to believe that. But it's noted in sworn statements by those taken shortly after Caleb died, within days. That's in multiple statements that Caleb was turned away. And again, people who were in his leadership team said that, not just his peers, but his command.
And the irony of this is all of this, the Army, by my estimation, the Army has admitted culpability because they did discipline one soldier in this situation for lying about a wellness check. Now, we know there were more than that involved, but they did discipline one person and busted him down in rank. And of course, it was a low man on the totem pole. Nobody who actually should have been held responsible has been held responsible. But that's, in my mind, that's the Army admitting
we did
culpability. We did do something, and we took care of the problem.
Yeah, but the thing is that he was punished by him ranking down because
he got an article. Basically, got an Article 15 out of the deal
because he lied about checking on him.
Right.
Not because he didn't check on him, but because he lied about it. It was a lie that got him. If he hadn't lied about it, what would have happened then? If that's the case.
Doesn't it almost seem like they've shot themselves in the foot on numerous fronts? Because they got two, let's say they're operating like a normal person with 2 feet, and they shot themselves in the foot with one by disciplining this low man on the totem pole and busting him in rank for lying, which of course is considered an ethics situation. But they've admitted there was culpability there because there was something that was done wrong. So they know that the system failed him. But they've also admitted that he did receive negligent care, but he was seen at Womack, and the doctor's at fault, but they're not responsible because the doctor is a contractor. So there's these two tracks doing what tracks do, running parallel with each other, where they've admitted something's wrong on both sides, and they're still asserting immunity because Ferris.
Exactly. And that's the shield. They can be so blatant because the unfortunate reality for service members and their loved ones like Heather is, with the current status of the law, if it's not in the medical parameters of this law, even if they say we were negligent and he shouldn't have died, had we checked on Caleb, there's a provision in the regulation that says if the negligence didn't happen in a military treatment facility, aka a fort's medical facility, it's not covered. So had that, just taking away the Womack, right? If this was strictly just what happened in the barracks, everyone knew, no one checked on Caleb, they know under Ferris, there's nothing someone can do.
Even though they're admitting it, that people failed.
Yes.
So the inroad for your argumentation is medical negligence, because Ferris has this very narrow window for that. And so now they're tacitly admitting there was medical negligence, but we're off the hook.
They didn't put it as clear as that. They're saying we didn't, because of the involvement of the contractor, we didn't even go there. That's somebody else's job, which is, again, kind of crazy if they're keeping this individual to service members.
Right.
That's exactly. It's like, I didn't know he was still there. When you told me that he's still there, I'm like,
well, as soon as I got the message, as soon as I got the denial letter, it had his name in there, I immediately called the Womack Army Medical Center that instant.
So let me ask it from this perspective. Daniel, you're very focused on Heather's case, but you're focused on it from servicing the service member in this situation. If the Army is going to throw this out and say, look, Ferris doctrine, not on the hook for the medical negligence, even if it does exist because contractor, does Heather have a case then against this guy for medical malpractice?
Presumably we would. If he carries his own, but see, it also becomes a really complicated legal thing, because wouldn't
If
it be
it's
something
covered for malpractice by the military, by the DoD, then Ferris Doctrine.
if there's a lot of ways that could go. If we filed suit against him individually and the DoD steps in and says he's actually our employee, you can't sue him individually. We're going to remove this into federal court and then use Ferris to say you can't sue him.
Okay. So, folks, this is tacitly Ferris Doctrine. For those of you who don't pay much attention to all the intricacies of the military, what Daniel's describing here, what Heather's been talking about, what this boils down to, go with me on this because I'm gonna draw some links. We hear a lot of talk right now in the civilian world about qualified immunity for public sector employees, be it law enforcement to the clerk at the tax assessor's office. They're all covered under qualified immunity. And outside of an egregious case that has happened once before that established a precedence that would eliminate qualified immunity, and they call it piercing the veil of immunity, one-time error is covered normally when a judge rules and said, well, this has never happened before, so they had no reasonable expectation to understand that they were doing something wrong. What you're dealing with Ferris Doctrine and the way the DoD and the Army are handling this right now is tacitly qualified immunity for the military and for this freaking doctor. Because all they have to do is say contractor, and then if there's a civil case against the doctor outside of the military contract, that they can say, oh, well, we covered his malpractice. So Ferris Doctrine. This is how injustice happens, people. This is how this crap, I almost said something I shouldn't. I've been working better at not losing my top, blowing my top on my own show. This is how this crap continues. Do you, Daniel, think that there's got to be a way to begin to unravel this mess? There's got to be a way to start to reform this crap, because I saw the list Heather sent me, and while you answer this question, there are dozens and dozens and dozens of soldiers who died CONUS in the United States, continental United States, non-combat related, under fishy circumstances, that are all dealing with this garbage.
Yeah, so there's definitely, we need Congress to step up to fix this issue, to give the rights to the service members that everyone else has. That if they could at least break through by defining incident to service, this term that the court uses to capture everything, by Congress articulating a definition of what that could or can't be. Let's say incident to service is anything that arises out of combatant activities of the military. Because I think everyone that signs up can agree, nobody's going to be seeking to sue in the situation of combat. That is what you're putting your life on the line when you sign up. You know that is the risk. Your family knows that's the risk.
Exactly.
But
we wouldn't be having this conversation if this was strictly what it was.
Exactly. So I think and the courts have laid it out up to the highest levels that there is a delineation. And you know what's also crazy? The federal law, the Federal Tort Claims Act, technically permits service members to sue for everything but combatant activities. So why is it that we've allowed the court to take this and legislate by saying incident to service means you're barred, and Congress has been okay with that? And if Congress can step up and fix this by carving out an incident to service definition under the Federal Tort Claims Act, presumably you would have your right to court in the scenarios that aren't considered incident to service. And that's not to say that you're going to win every time, but I can assure you there will be real change in the DoD once they know there is possible liability if they get caught in a scenario that often happens, and there would be some positive changes from that.
So I just put up the Locked and Loaded Diaries document that Heather had sent me a few days back. And this is an image, for those of you who are listening, it's an image of all service members who have died outside of combat situations from January 2021 2021 to January 2022, there are literally dozens of people on this list, and it's all in relation to the Ferris Doctrine. Dozens. I like at least I'm seeing at least 70 names in a year's time. And we don't even know what it's now been from January 2021 to January 2023. How many more has it been? Daniel, how much of a problem do you see this remaining for the military and for family members, especially survivors, as we start to bring more and more people back from combat zones and back to where they belong, which is here on our own soil? If this doesn't get fixed real fast, how bad is it going to get?
It's progressively getting worse, and it can only get exponentially worse. The more the lack of corrections, even just using Caleb's case, right? If the idea that somebody that could be responsible for malpractice is allowed to continue treating 3 years of service members in an ER facility at a base, one of our biggest bases, right? That you multiply that, right, as to one bad actor in every facility. How many people are they touching? How many people are they treating? How many people are they going to impact, and the life and the families that will be impacted, versus holding them accountable on the front end and making corrective measures to ensure this doesn't happen on the back end, which would be the legitimate thing that, again, taking a private facility, a private hospital, this couldn't happen. Multiple issues like this could, and I know people at Fort Bragg that had horrendous things happen to them at Womack, in terms of, you don't need to talk to many people that have been stationed at Fort Bragg to know how the rumors and the notoriety of the poor care. It shouldn't just be accepted that our service members get poor care and that's just something you have to deal with as a service member. Absolutely not. That's a complete injustice for people that are giving their lives for our country.
I was sent back out to go on jumps with a hairline fracture in my right tibia.
Yeah, so you've lived it firsthand. You knew what you were dealing with and what they gave you response-wise.
I'm like, Doc, I can't run. What do you mean you can't run? Like, literally, when I run, my leg collapses under me. Tough it up, soldier. I can't run. I'm like, I love to run. I can't run. Yeah, so, I mean, but let's be clear, too. It's not just Womack. Womack being what it is, with the Airborne being there, which, of course, is prone to a lot of injury anyway. It's not just Womack. I mean, and Tony is watching, made a comment about the malingerers out there, and I think that's a lot of what happens in these situations. Is they look at a soldier and they assume the soldier doesn't want to do something, wants to take the day off or wants a few days off, and they're going in to try and get a work profile or a PT profile. And they're like, you know what, you've got a headache, you poor thing, or, oh, you hit your head, you poor thing, or, oh, you twisted your ankle, you poor thing. And they just brush it off. There's no standard of care. Well, there is a standard of care. It's an ass of a standard, but there's a standard of care. It's just poor. And this is where we end up. And here's what pisses me off. And I said this the very first time that I ever talked to Heather on Vet Nation a few weeks ago. Like the 82nd Airborne kind of has a lot of that same Ranger mentality of you never leave a man behind. Airborne has a prestige. It has a reputation for, you learn to fight alongside these people because you're not in a massive infantry unit. It's you and a few others. You don't know how many people you're going to have around you. You fight for each other. You give a damn. I don't care how much you might beat the crap out of each other in the motor pool parking lot when you're arguing over something stupid on a Wednesday afternoon and you get into a fight. You fight it out, and then everybody's watching to make sure there's no senior people coming around. And then if there are, then all of a sudden you're best friends again. But you fight and you fight and you fight and you fight and you fight for each other. And in this situation, there was no one there. There's like, I don't know if it's something that's happening with the recruiting process, with the training process. What's going on? I'd like to say this wouldn't have happened when I was at Bragg. I don't know for a fact that it wouldn't have, but there's something has changed in the mentality of the military as a whole where we don't give a damn about anybody else anymore. Because I'm hearing stories like this over and over and over and over and over again, and something has got to change. Heather and Daniel, give us an idea of what we can do, the viewers and anybody who's catching this, what we can do. Heather in particular, what can we do to help you? And then Daniel, what can we do to help you after Heather answers?
Well, just really quick, basic human kindness, I think, is missing in the picture here. And I think that's at the core and the base of our, military's desire to help other countries and help other, and so like we're missing that. We're missing the human kindness. And I don't know, that's one thing that I've noticed. But the other thing is, the way you can help us right now, I would say, is to go to PV2, or actually it's calebsmither.com, CALEBSMITHER.
The link is in the description of the video, and it's also in the live chat.
And there is a link on there to a petition that you can sign. That would be very helpful. I think if you spend like $3, then they hand deliver a letter. And then there is a form letter that Daniel helped me put together, that's on Caleb's website that you can just download. You can insert your congressman, your senators, or, we have a list of Senate and House Armed Service Committee members. You guys can look those guys up. Send this form letter for us, and that would really, really help. But just thank you for sharing the live link. Thank you for listening to Caleb's story, and this is all about making sure that we don't leave a man behind, that we stay the unbroken chain together.
We can't do anything to help you bring Caleb back, but maybe we can help fight so this changes in the future. Daniel, how much pressure would it take, do you think, to get Congress to start paying attention to this? Because Congress is the only one who can change Ferris. The courts can make a lot of rulings, but that won't change Ferris. Do you think the public getting involved could start to get Congress to pay attention to changing Ferris to make this easier?
Absolutely. I think that's an essential part of this, because the unfortunate reality is a lot of our Congress members that were there when they passed this carve out in 2020 for medical malpractice thinks they solved the Ferris issue. But you would be shocked with the amount of folks that were involved with, helping that legislation get through, how shocked they are to find out how the military has actually played out these claims, so that over 90% of them have been denied. And that of those that have been accepted, the reductions, the changes, the minimizing that the DOD does. And it goes back to what you were saying, is that you're playing against the DOD. This is the apex of the government when it comes to winning, right? The DOD doesn't do anything to lose. The DOD has a plan to win. And I can assure you that in implementing this law, they had a plan to win in a majority of scenarios. And what winning looks like is not helping the family or the service member as the law was intended to do. It is ensuring the DOD is still shielded and that limit is there. So I think putting the pressure on our Congress, our senators, to know that this is something we care about as the public, and we will not stop caring about until our service members get the rights they deserve, is a very important thing. And I think there's going to be a large effort here moving forward, because things are coming out as to how this law has been processed with the military medical malpractice claims and how disingenuous the DOD has processed claims. And I think there will be a push here, whether it's, I know that there's a lot of veteran service organizations that are talking about getting some type of Ferris carve out, whether it be defining incident to service or not. I think the American Legion has passed something nationally that's for legislative goals to push that. And I think there's a lot of other smaller, service organizations. The more people we can get aware of this issue to know what the hurdles are and why there needs to be some form of justice for this group of our citizens that are just left out in the wind. These are the people giving their lives. The least we can do is ensure that in the situation where we screw them, they're taken care of, and that doesn't have to happen to someone again in the future. That there's changes that are positively made to ensure these things don't happen, because all of us want our military to be the best thing in the world. And it starts, if this is how our service takes care of our service members on our soil, you don't need to be a rocket like that. That sends a message that there's a problem. If we don't correct these things, this is a problem. So I think educating your Congress member, your senator, saying, I care about this. If there's legislation that comes across your desk, I would like you to know that we're watching. We want you to vote for it. We care, and I want you to be aware of what Ferris is and why service members are getting screwed out of what law you did pass. It's not fixed. And you need to look at this.
And make no mistake, if you are a person who does reach out to your congressman or your senator and they don't show any interest in this at all, you let me know who it is, and I will put that person on blast. I will flat out put. I'm not enamored of fame or position. I've done it here in Minnesota. I've called people out by name. Caused me some trouble. Cost me a career. But I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid to do it, because nobody's going to fight for us unless we fight for ourselves. Daniel and Heather, I appreciate you doing this. I know that you're going to be on the decompression chamber with my friend Andrea on Friday.
Well, we had to reschedule that.
Well, okay. Well,
yes.
you're going to be rescheduling, but you're going to be going on with Andrea for the decompression chamber very soon. And Andrea is another vet, Navy vet with her own show. She used to work at Gas Digital, so she knows people like Dave Smith and others. So I don't know if that'll give you any traction. It's certainly a bigger platform than I would be able to get you to. But let's keep trying to get your story out there. Daniel, thank you for doing this. I know that it's not easy work, and I know you gotta write a final argument or something before the end of the night. You're an attorney, don't you have a clerk or something? What the heck?
Yeah, you got to put those finishing touches yourself. You can't just leave that to someone else.
So, well, you guys go. You get out of here, and I will do my close. If you want to sit in the green room and listen to make sure I don't say anything that's going to be damaging, I won't, but you can listen if you want.
You'll be all good. TC, thank you for the opportunity to speak again, and anytime you just let me know.
Get a hold of me and we'll get you on for a show or two about Ferris and some of the other stuff outside of what's going on with Caleb. Heather, thank you so much for your time tonight. Absolutely. Let me know when you're going on with Andrea so I can be paying attention to that. So
good night, guys.
You guys have a good night.
Thanks.
This is why my channel exists, folks. This isn't just a human interest story. This is a story about an individual, about several individuals. It's about Heather and her daughter and her mother and everybody who cared about Caleb. It's about Caleb's girlfriend who lost a man that she loved. These people all lost a loved one. And no one is helping them from the organizations that should be the most helpful. What's going on here? And like I said earlier, this is just like qualified immunity in the civilian world for public sector employees, cops, and human resources. That's what this is. The military has given itself qualified immunity through the Ferris Doctrine. They've figured a workaround and they figured out how to protect themselves. They're not interested in protecting the soldiers and the airmen or the Marines or the sailors or the seamen. None of that. That's not what they're interested in. They're interested in themselves. That's all they're interested in. And this is not just a DOD issue, because if you look at the Department of Veteran Affairs, it's the same freaking thing. These people don't give a damn. They don't care. They don't care how much you're hurting as long as they don't have to deal with it. So I don't care if 10 of you watch this. I don't care if 2,010 of you watch this. I don't care if 4,010 or 50,000 people watch this video. However many of you watching this, take the time to go to the website. The link is in the description of the video. Go to the website, find that form letter, find out who your congressman is, find out who your senator is if you don't know, and you send them a copy of that letter and you tell them you expect action to be taken to change the Ferris Doctrine and these carve-outs so that we can actually start to see justice for our veterans, justice for our active duty service members who are injured outside of the war zone. This incident to service crap has got to stop. Because as we heard tonight, everything is an incident to service in their eyes. Our military, active duty, National Guard, reserves, and our veterans deserve better treatment than they get from the people, the regimists who run this country. This has got to stop. And if you don't get anywhere with them, or if they tell you to go take a flying leap at a rolling O, you let me know and we'll deal with it. We'll put them on blast. Better if you can get their conversation recorded or you can keep a copy of an email. If you get some form email and you send that letter every single time, you send an email every single day, and if you just keep getting the same thing over and over and over again, we're going to start putting people on blast. They work for us. They serve us. But they treat us like we serve them. And that's got to stop. So, folks, one more time, if I don't, I hate asking. I really do. But TC could use some help. I'd like to have some more subscribers on my Subscribe Star. I'm going to try and come up with a way to make it beneficial to you guys. But I could use it. It helps me keep the internet going, helps me keep my equipment running. So if you're interested, I'm going to show you the page here real quick. There's a $3 entry level. I have a $3 entry level. And I'm not going to say, no, I don't want that. I'll take any entry level that you guys can give me. There it is. That's it. Right there. Head over to my Subscribe Star. It's very easy, very recognizable. Pick a level. Every single dollar helps. Every single dollar helps. And I promise you there will be content that's going to be for you guys there. And the more subscribers that I get at Subscribe Star, the more I'm going to probably start offering things through like my Discord, because I have a Discord page that comes, you automatically get linked to my Discord. I'd appreciate the help. That's what it is. And I also have, and if you want to do that, I have coffee. I have the beanies. I've got especially if you're in a colder climate, or if you're a wimp who lives in the southern climate and you just don't like cold air, I've got the beanies for that. I've got mugs, shot glasses. I've got stuff. One way or another, I'd appreciate it. And because I'm not going to stop fighting. I'm not going to stop fighting for you guys. I'm not going to stop fighting for strangers. And it's because that's what we do for people we respect. I just did a video about a family up in northern part of Minnesota whose township just took their road away from them 2 years ago. And the state has failed them on every level. They have a road. They don't have a road. They've literally, think about that. They're cut off. I'll fight for them. I don't care what their politics are. I'll fight for them. Special note too. Wednesday night, my friend Walter Hudson, representative here in the state of Minnesota, is going to be coming on, and we're going to be talking about the current state of affairs here in Minnesota with the trifecta that they keep calling this. The leftists and the DFL call it their trifecta, their magical trifecta, and everything they're pushing. So we're going to be bringing Walter on to talk about their hate speech legislation that they're doing with the Department of Civil Rights Department. I don't know what it is. But the hate speech legislation. We're going to be talking about the firearms control legislation. And I think we might even be having a conversation about no-knock warrants, along with some other things that Walter's experienced so far in his first go as a member of the Minnesota House of Representatives. Walter's a stand-up guy. He's not your he's a statesman. I've told him that for a very long time. He is a statesman. He actually cares about the people he serves. And he doesn't just represent them. He ends up representing all of us here in the state of Minnesota better than anybody else I've seen in a very long time. He's articulate. He's erudite. And he is a fireball when it comes to standing up for what's right. So my friends, like always, until next time, fight for your freedoms. They are yours. Fight for your liberty. It belongs to you. And Sic Semper, Tyrannus.
We are go for liftoff in T-30. Stand by for further instructions, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment. Secondary guidance systems engaged. Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark. Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at